we'll let Scott take it away. Any hammers today, Scott?
I don't know. We'll see what we can do. Sorry, I'm late. I don't know what was going on. I was hitting the link I had, and it wasn't letting me in. And I figured maybe I'd been fired. But no, I wanted to kind of touch on these little pocket guns, or as people call them, mouse guns, because thinking about it, like the golden era of milsurp stuff has sort of passed us by, where you can't go into a big box, sporting goods store and just buy an old Enfield out of a trash can for $89, and SKSs and all that stuff has gone up in value, and we're just not seeing, the cheap milsurps anymore. But people still kind of like to collect, little sub groups of firearms, and I figured that these little mouse guns, these little pocket guns, are a good place to start because they're pretty available and they're not a lot of money. It's a fairly inexpensive collection to begin. It can get expensive, as is any rabbit hole in the firearms world, but these have always kind of fascinated me, not so much from a useful standpoint, because most of them are 25 ACP or 22, and all you're going to do is annoy people unless you can get them to stand still and use it at point blank range. But so they're really more just range toys and just for fun and enjoyment. Some of them, I think, 32 ACP maybe could be somewhat useful for personal protection these days, but there's so many better choices that, but I just love these things. They're fun, they're interesting. And I got a little collection here of some of these pocket pistols from early on in the development of these things to kind of, semi-modern. And, I'll kind of talk about where I got them and the functionality and kind of why I like them. But I don't think I've paid more than $250 for any one of these. They're all reasonably inexpensive. Most of them I find on auction sites like Proxy Bid or High Bid, and just scour auctions, and you'll see them in there. And it's interesting because a lot of times these things aren't what people are looking for, so they slip through the cracks as far as, being something neat and fairly affordable. People don't realize the significance of some of them. Some of them can get fairly expensive, like this little Mauser is worth quite a bit because they only produced them for a few years. And then this is the least produced variant of the thing. And then these Colt vest pockets have gone way up in value. These used to be semi-affordable, but nowadays, you're hard pressed to find one for cheap unless it's been pretty well ridden hard and hashed, and rusty and corroded. But so those two are kind of at the higher end. But so I think I'll kind of start in the beginning, and this idea kind of started in the Old West, the 1870s, probably 1880s, 1890s, of guys not being able to wear their old Colt 6-shooter into town, where they weren't allowed to be armed, so people would like to carry smaller guns and conceal them, and so they started creating these mainly break top revolvers, like an old Smith & Wesson lemon squeezer, something like that, just to have some sort of personal protection on hand. I do have a couple of revolver variants, but I'm really more into the semi-automatics, and we'll kind of get to that in a minute. But this is a very early 22 revolver, and it's very crude, but it works. I only ever shoot the 22 shorts out of it, or CB caps, because it's an old gun and there's no reason to run modern smokeless powder through it. I don't have any reason to put that much pressure into it, but it's just it's called the Defender, and I'm not sure who made it. It's not stamped with anything else, no serial number. no roll mark or anything like that. And I'm fairly certain that it's old enough. I mean, I'm sure it's a CNR gun, but it goes back way before they started as a practice serializing guns. But it's neat. It's got a little spur trigger down here. There's no trigger guard. And that trigger is not activated until you pull the hammer back. So now the trigger's got some tension on it, and it's not super lightweight. I don't want to dry fire it, but it's got a fairly stout little trigger pull on it. So it's not as dangerous as people think. These little spur triggers are little. I would never call them safe, but they're not. You're not going to set it off just touching it. But this is a good place to start. Is looking at these old revolvers. If for some reason the little brake tops and stuff like that just really don't hold a lot of value. They're Harrington and Richardson and Iverson Johnson and several other manufacturers made thousands of them, and they're readily available. I've seen them well under $200 many times, and you can get them where they're not functioning, and parts are fairly available for them, but they're used parts. And they were mass produced, but oftentimes you'll end up having to fit pieces, rebuilding some of those old guns. But they're fun to mess with. They're a great way to learn about this, tearing down and fixing guns, or like if you want to practice rebluing, these are perfect guns for that. If I wanted to practice nickel plating, it'd be fun to strip this down and replate it. So that those are a really good place to start your collection if you don't already have some collecting direction. Look for those, the old brake tops. Most of them are black powder cartridges, so you don't want to run a lot of modern smokeless ammo through them. You might have to either try to find some black powder loads for it or make up your own. But it's really not a hard thing to do. So, that's kind of the start where I would suggest you start is, did my video go out? That's weird.
Nope. You're still good. You're fine. And there, the video just went out.
Oh, okay. Let me try to, I wonder what the heck going on. That's weird.
One of the comments made while you're looking at that in chat is that a lot of those little revolvers date from an era that's classified as antique rather than curio and relic.
The definition for an antique, I'm going to throw a new battery in this thing. The definition for an antique is that it can't be a cartridge that's readily available, commercially available. So this one wouldn't qualify for that because it is a 22. But something like 32 S&W short or something like that would probably be fine because you can't just go down to Cabela's and buy it. Let me get this thing replaced real quick. So, that's your definition of an antique according to the ATF, is it can't be, yes, any cartridge could be produced. You can load your own of pretty much anything with enough time, but it can't be that easy. So let me see here, grab one of these. And I meant to do this before the meeting, but I didn't do it. It's been a busy day. All right. There we go. Sorry about that.
Yep, you have video again. Yeah, sometimes the technical difficulties just stack up one on top of each other.
They seem to hit me right at meeting time every week or every other week here. All right, let's get back into the game here. Get it tightened up. Make sure I got my focus set. And we'll let Kronk edit this out. So anyway, like I was saying, I would really look at some of these old revolvers as a starting place. They're just really fun and readily available and fairly easy to work on. But I really like the semi-autos mouse guns because they're such an interesting evolution of kind of firearms design. And this is an old French, Charles P.H. Clement Lee. It was in Ligier, or maybe it's Belgian. I don't know, but it's an old semi-automatic. I'm pretty sure it's 22. It doesn't fire, so I need to tear into it and figure out what's going on. But it feeds and cycles 22 blanks or 22 dummy rounds. So I'm sure that that's what it is. But what's interesting is the barrel is below. Of course, none of these are loaded. I should preface that. None of these are loaded. They've all been double checked. I don't have any ammunition on the bench, so, just for safety reasons. But you'll notice down the barrel is low and the recoil spring and rod are above it. So, it's kind of an early gun. They were trying new things out, trying to find designs that worked. And to charge it, you grab these two buttons here on the side and pull back, and you can see your bolt slides back out of the gun like that. So it's kind of neat. It's fun to take something like this apart and get a look at what the engineers and firearms designers were thinking in those days. And it's been my experience that French guns are usually the weirdest of the bunch for whatever reason. But that's and there's a fair bit of data on some of these guns. Some of them are fairly common, or were common enough to have some history of them. This is another one that I've been working on, and I need to make a couple of parts for it. It is a caliber that doesn't exist anymore. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to make brass for it or just kind of have to use it as a, save queen, but it's the same design. You'll notice up here, I have a kind of a fake guide rod that I had to kind of make just to hold the thing together. But once again, our barrel is below the guide rod. And once again, our slide to charge it goes backwards out of the gun, like so. This one's OWA, made in Austria. And it was made in 1922. Of course, you have your safety back here. This is your safety. And then this is part of your takedown right here. So there's a couple of pieces, like there's a little crack right up here. I don't think it's something that would affect, I wouldn't want to fire it too much that way, but I don't think it's something that's going to structurally cause the gun to fail. But, I've got the upper half of another one of these that I found on eBay. So I'm slowly stripping the parts out of it and trying to get it to work. But, once again, just interesting, the beginnings of the semi-automatic guns. And then we go to, of course, the Colt, which is sort of the, as we all know, John Moses Browning was a genius of firearms design. And this is the 1908 vest pocket. And it's a design that's still around. This one, John Browning was ahead of his contemporaries, because this is really the basic design of a lot of modern guns. It's got the grip safety back here, like a 1911. There's a lot of safeties up here. There's just a lot of features of it that are still around. This is a little internal hammer fired gun. No, wait, I can't remember. This one I think is a striker fired gun. So, the striker fired functionality has been around a lot longer than people realize. 120 years ago, Browning designed this thing, and the thing still works. It's probably, this or the little Mauser are probably the nicest little guns that I have no worries shooting, because of the quality and the fit and finish on them, and the overall just reliability of them. But these are a little bit expensive now. They're running a good solid, original copy of one of these, can be, hundreds of dollars depending on the condition. But if you're going to buy one, take a look at, you want to see the case color hardening. That doesn't show up on the camera, but the trigger, the safety, and the grip safety are all color case hardened. So that's something you want to take a look at when you're buying one of these. If it's blued or if it's completely worn off, and then make sure it's not been refinished. Check the roll marks and make sure that it hasn't been sanded and all of that kind of rounded off, and check the, for the sharp angles and, things like that. But just a unrestored copy of this, I think I paid this one I paid more than $250 for. I think I paid considerably more for that because I've always wanted one of these, but this is probably, an exception to the mouse gun collection. This one's not cheap, but another good place to start if you're not interested in revolvers are these little Spanish and Italian. This is an Italian gun. It's made by Rigarmi. It's a 25 caliber, and these things, variants of this thing, are everywhere. And there's a whole, you can find them just about on any auction in 22, 25, and sometimes 32 ACP. And these are just a heck of a lot of fun. They run pretty well. Most of them have the European heel release on the magazine. Sometimes magazines can be difficult to find for these. So if you find one without a magazine, you're going to be in for a bit of a joyride trying to find the correct one, because they don't always match they're all based off of the Browning design, but they don't all, they're not interchangeable. So these little Italian ones are really fun, and they're really not expensive. This is another more modern version of that same gun. This is FIE, and these were made, I believe, up into the 70s. I could be wrong, but I know that they're fairly modern. And this is just if you'll notice, this is a striker fired or internal hammer gun, and then this is a hammer fired. But it's a very similar gun, and looks like a little mini Beretta is what I liked about it. It's got that exposed barrel, and of course it's Italian, so it kind of got that Beretta look and feel to it. But these are not expensive at all, and they're readily available. You take it apart, and you see your magazine and your ejector, recoil spring and guide rod, the fixed barrel. So keep an eye out for these. This is the FIE. They're out there. They're pretty available, and there's different. Ruby was another Spanish company that produced a lot of these. They're Spanish, and there's variants of the Ruby, and they did most of their designs that I've seen are just copies of other people that came before them. But Ruby guns are around quite a bit, and a lot of times, a lot of these that don't have clear markings on them, people will just call it a Ruby. That's not necessarily correct, but a lot of people, they were so prolific that people just call them that. So then my favorite of the whole collection used to be the vest pocket, but now it's this little tiny Mauser. And if you look, the vest pocket's tiny. Usually when people pick this thing up, they're amazed at how small it is. But then you look at it compared to the Mauser, and the Mauser's even smaller. And this thing shoots 25 ACP. A lot of these were carried by German officers as sort of a boot gun, or, when they couldn't, carry a pistol or a sidearm somewhere, they carry these. So and they were made all the way up into the 40s, but during World War II, no, I think they were made into the late 30s. During World War II, Mauser was told to knock it off and start making more weapons for the war. And of course, I don't think too many guys went to war with a 25 ACP. This is called a WTP, and they've made 3 variants of it. And there's, of course, a whole lot of, ways that you can tell the different variants, but it's kind of not relevant to this conversation. But it's a little striker fired gun, and it's interesting. The teardown on this thing, it took me a while when I first got it. I was trying all the different ways that I knew to take a gun apart. Turns out this is the takedown right here at the bottom of the trigger guard. You just flip this up, and then your slide, let me get the magazine out of it. Your slide then just slides right off, theoretically. Let me get it out of the way. Yeah, come on. There we go. So once you flip that little thing down, then this just slides right off. There's your frame. Little tiny guts in it. Here, let me get the recoil spring out. Well, I don't want to get to a situation where I can't put it back together, but
What caliber was the OWA, Scott?
the OWA is some 5mm French thing. I can't recall. It wasn't a common commercial caliber at the time, let alone available now. It's not even stamped on the gun, but it's not bored for 25 ACP or 22, or and you can see here a 22 doesn't quite fit in there because so anyway, it's just an interesting artifact. But like I said, I'm looking at this little tiny Mauser, and the craftsmanship and the machining on this thing is just so perfect. It just is. It's a work of art just from a manufacturing standpoint, as you would expect from a Mauser. But it's, between this and the Colt, these are just by leaps and bounds way nicer guns overall in fit and finish, design. Anything that it's just a superior gun. But it's interesting. The takedown is just this little knob back here. And all it does is has this little plunger. I don't know if it's going to show up, but it's this little plunger that comes up and locks in to the barrel right here. You see this little hole right here. It just locks in there, and that's what holds it together. So it's pretty weird, pretty neat little gun. And then let me put it back together. Lock it in place. There we go. So now it's just back together. But just a clean, simple, elegant little gun. Fun to shoot, not exactly accurate, but certainly a kick to take out to the range and play around with. And then we get kind of into more modern stuff. The idea of the pocket carry isn't dead, but nowadays we have all of the little subcompacts and things like that, which kind of fit that niche, and they carry more powerful cartridges, like arguably 380 is more powerful than 32 ACP, but it's not something that I would prefer to carry. But 380 little pocket guns and subcompacts and 9mm, like the 365 and that kind of thing, the Hellcat have kind of taken over this space. But there's always the old Derringers, which I kind of consider them pocket guns because that's really where people carried them. This is an interesting one. This is a fairly late model. It's made by Cobra, and that may be familiar to some of you 80s gun fans. But this is just a break top single shot revolver. You just pull back on this and it breaks open. And this shoots 45 Colt and 410 shotgun shells, which I can tell you in this is just not a lot of fun. It's interesting, but it's not fun to shoot. Your hands will remind you of, plus the grip on this thing is terrible. But they're just fun. Derringers are a whole nother kind of rabbit hole to go down. So this is kind of like a Derringer. I think they made this in a double barrel as well, side by side. But I just liked it because it was so crude and basic for a gun made in modern times. It just, it looks like something that you could just make yourself, and I'm sure you could pretty easily. But Derringers are a whole nother way to go. I don't, like I said, I don't have too many of the revolvers, but I think a modern equivalent to some of this stuff to me in a pocket gun is this Smith & Wesson little J-frame snubby. But you can see, if you've ever shot one of these, they're pretty small. They're, I consider them a jacket gun. You can just throw this in the pocket of a jacket. But if you look at it compared to the size of some of these things, you can really see how tiny some of these little mouse guns were when you compare the two. And then, of course, this shoots 38. And you can shoot plus Ps through the later models of these. So, if for a personal protection standpoint, I certainly would prefer the modern J-frame over any of these. But I have a couple more in the safe. But in general, this is a fun little area to collect in because it won't kill you. You're not paying thousands of dollars to have different examples of some of these things. You can get up into that range if you really want to work hard at finding, one of these that's engraved or has some interesting provenance to it. But most of the time, the guns themselves really aren't worth that much. So for people on a budget that want to start collecting, it's a great place to start. Some of us remember the heyday of milsurp stuff, and this is kind of, to me, kind of the same thing now. You can start collecting these things without going broke. So anyway, are there any questions about this stuff?
Did you pick up the Titan again?
The Titan? Yeah.
I thought you had a Titan.
It's where is it at? The FIE.
That might have been it.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me put it back together for you.
While you're doing that, I looked at the local gun store up here in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan, and they had one of those Titans for $100.
Yeah.
Flat.
Yeah, they're another one that I would avoid are the old Raven, the Ring of Fire guns from the 80s. I would stay away from Raven and Jimenez and a lot of the guns from that period. Davis. Those are terrible. They're fun to have just because they're terrible, but some of the Davises were downright dangerous, where the Davis 380 was known to detonate itself. So, but I would just stay away from the Ring of Fire guns. You can look up Ring of Fire guns and get a list of the manufacturers, but you can pick those things up for less than $100.
So like Lorcan or Lorson and Bryco,
Lorcan, yeah, Lorcan was Jake. I can't remember all of the names. What happened was this one guy started the company, and then he opened subdivisions, with different brands for his kids, and they would get sued, so they would dissolve one company and then remake the same gun with a different name and change the design slightly. So there's a whole list of them. From but just look up Ring of Fire handguns and you can find the whole list of those things. Okay, I see somebody said Jennings and Bryco. Yeah, same thing. There's Jimenez, Jennings, Bryco, Davis, Lorcan, Raven. There may be others, but yeah, stay away from those unless you just want them for the meme value. They're great for that, but I wouldn't pay much for them at all. They're just not reliable. And I have a nickel-plated Raven 25 that won't even cycle. It's just abysmal, but it's fun just because of what it is. But there will never be collector value on those things. But these are easy to find because a lot of people don't really. Most people are buying guns as utilities or as tools and don't really. They look at these things and can't see a value in them.
Well, collecting and just having fun is value, right?
That's why I collect them. I just love them. I love just to watch the history of the evolution of semi-automatic design and how it's changed and how it's not changed from that period. And some of these are great examples of it. From here, you can go up, pardon my reach, and you can raise, you can go up to the larger stuff. This is a Savage, I think it's the 1910, 32 ACP. These are also another kind of, they're bigger, but they're kind of in the same area that a lot of people don't collect them. Some of them are worth a fair bit of money because of their historical significance or rarity, but these 32 ACP guns are really fun. These are more of a compact size, but they're really a lot of fun in the same way as that the design and engineering of these things gets really, really interesting. So this one, there's Astra made a variant of this thing, and it's got one of the worst springs for charging. It's just so brutally hard, but it's fun. And then I have, this is the big brother, the 1908 or the 1903 pocket hammerless. This is a Colt. It's 32 ACP. These are getting pretty darned expensive, but there are a lot of these kind of compact 32 ACP guns that are fun to get into, along with the little pocket guns or mouse guns. 32 ACP, I guess some people still consider it a viable self-defense round. I really don't, but it's, comparable, I guess, to the 380, a little bit less spicy. But keep an eye out for these little kind of mid-size 32 ACPs. I think 380s were around in those days too. So just something to consider. Yeah.
I don't see any other questions. Last call for questions if anyone has any.
Yeah. I know it's kind of rehashing old guns, and I talk about old guns a lot, but I also get a lot of questions about collecting. So that's kind of why I wanted to bring it up and give people that.
Well, of course. Variety is the spice of life. Sometimes it's Glocks, sometimes it's CZs, sometimes it's something from the late 1800s.
Yeah, sometimes it's a French gun. So anyway, well, all right, I'll let you all go. I just
there's one other question, Scott.
Sure.
But I'm not sure I understand it. So it says HP top open. Could you retype that, Dave?
This one? I'm not sure what the question is.
I'm not sure at this moment either. We'll give him another minute to type that out.
Yeah, this is just a Cobra single shot.
And someone mentioned they make a double barrel side-by-side version of that as well.
Yeah. What is it? HP with California made HP. Anyway, yeah, Cobra. They made like I can't remember what was the big 80s kind of Uzi style gun, like a Mac 11 or something like that. They made they're not around anymore, but they were around into the 80s. But that thing just plain sucks to shoot. Anyway, all right. Okay. Well, I'm open for suggestions if there's anything you guys want to cover. Anything with maintaining or fixing or working on guns, modern or old, I'm open for ideas of stuff if you want to see how to or learn how to do it or see how I do things. I'm not always doing it right. I just do it my way.
But if it works, right?
Yeah, I don't get too many complaints.